They claim that our eyes will just be either slightly different from what they are. We talk, we see things that are not normal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. How are you tonight, Alison?
I'm well.
How was your weekend?
It was pretty good.
Good to hear.
Pretty good.
Good to hear. Hey, just a reminder, everybody, those Strange Familiars High Strangeness tour shirts. Got a long sleeve t-shirt with sleeve prints and a front and back print, as well as a zipper hoodie with a front breast print, back print, and sleeve prints. The pre-orders for those are up at strangefamiliars.com. We are taking pre-orders until February 27th. We are placing the order on February 28th.
This is not leap year. You do not have an extra day.
Please make sure to get your orders in if you want any kind of extended size. If you want a hoodie, especially, we're going to order really just a few hoodies beyond what is pre-ordered. So we'll have a few up on Etsy, but there's not going to be many because they're kind of expensive. T-shirts in normal sizes, small through maybe 2X, we're going to order a few for Etsy. But really, if you want to make sure you get one, or if you're an extended size and you want to make sure you get one in your size, you definitely want to pre-order. Again, those are the Strange Familiars High Strangeness tour shirts. You can look at the design and pre-order at strangefamiliars.com. Well, as we're leading up to episode 300, The Witch Cloud, numerically leading up to it, we decided to do a bunch of shows about Gettysburg. And in my research regarding something completely different, a haunted bridge which isn't one of the two haunted bridges we talk about in the Witch Cloud. In my research for that, I turned up a little statement about a hermit that lived along Rock Creek in Gettysburg. We often talk about how our research, one thing will lead to another, and this is the perfect example of that. I did not go looking for this hermit. This hermit came looking for us through our research. You know I have a hierarchy of hermits, Alison.
Like tramps and hobos are low down on the list, and then...
I like a proper hermit. Nothing against tramps and hobos. We'll be hearing about some tramps in this story.
Yeah.
But I like a proper hermit. But no, even amongst the proper hermits, I have my favorites.
Yeah, and you don't particularly like the people that were paid to be hermits. Like, they're not at the top, right?
Not really. No, I do like John Smith, who was the hermit of Irving Castle outside of Athol there in Massachusetts. He was a paid hermit in the UK, but he came over here and he transitioned to amateur.
Yeah. You like a tragic backstory and then just like, I'm going to the woods forever.
I like a little bit of that. I don't like, there's a couple hermits I call phonies, who apparently were very rich and then kind of did the hermit thing. As
like the kids that hang out in the square and like pretend to be, pretend to be like poor punks, and they're just like,
their parents drop them off each day, and they get out of a Mercedes and then go beg for change.
Poverty cosplay.
Those aren't my favorite.
Yeah.
But this guy, this hermit from Gettysburg, rocketed to the top of my hermits list. I think William Woodruff.
Yeah, he's really high up there for me.
He was I think he was the first hermit we talked about. I think he was the first hermit we talked about. He's always going to be, if not at the top, right near the top, because he was the first one for us. And he's literally what kind of got me into this. You bought me a photo postcard with William Woodruff on it. And I just didn't think about it for months and picked it out of a pile of things one day and looked at it and said, oh, he's kind of neat. I wonder if I can find him in the newspaper. And looked him up, and then, I started reading his story, and it's like, oh, wow, this guy's really interesting, and that got me on my hermit kick. So he'll always be high up there, but...
Here we have, like, a hermit that's really close by, too. We can visit him in spirit.
Exactly. This guy, he's super interesting. There's a good twist to his story, and he's local. There's another local hermit if you remember down in Gwinston, we went to look for evidence, but he was living there like in the 1820s or something.
Yeah, that really kind of predates any ability to really, really find too much on someone.
Yeah, exactly. And there's not a lot of public land or any, I don't think, down there that we could really
That's near Muddy
peruse.
Creek Forks and kind of close to Delta, where you give your talk about all the happenings there, right?
Yep. We might do more on the Gwinston Hermit someday if we can find more on them, but there's not a lot there. They talk about a railroad bridge and being able to see from the railroad bridge some walls and stuff he built through the woods. Well, we found the railroad bridge, but we were not able to see any of these stone walls. They didn't say which side of the railroad tracks to look at. One side is pretty much a bunch of houses now. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the other side of the creek, and if it was that side, I'm sure everything he built got torn down.
It would be really difficult for that to be sustained 200 years later.
Yeah. Well, this hermit that we're talking about today, he died 113 years ago, and we did find some evidence of where he was staying. So this is the first, local hermit that I could really dig into and kind of go to where he was. We'll hear some more about that coming up. The Wolf Hill Hermit. He had initials. GFGE Thomas. George Frederick G.E. Thomas. We're not sure what the GE stands for.
Clearly General Electric. Trust fund kid.
Founder of GE. He was a veteran of the German Army who came to America in 1872. They think he was born around 1847. Sometimes he's called George Thomas. Sometimes he's called Frederick Thomas. Sometimes he's called Herr Thomas. And sometimes he was called by his four initials, GFGE Thomas. We think he came to America possibly through Baltimore. GFGE Thomas became a naturalized U.S. citizen in Baltimore in 1883. This date is given in a newspaper article. However, it might not be correct, as we found a record of a Frederick Thomas being naturalized in Maryland in 1876.
Basically anything in the census has a good 15-year window of accuracy, I found.
Okay. These newspaper articles tend to, sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're close to accurate. And as we get into the articles about Herr Thomas, one article will say one thing, another article will say another. Sometimes they give different information. And you kind of have to sort out which got it right or which you think got it right. A couple of the articles we'll be reading about him note that his wife died, and that's why he decided to become a hermit.
That's a check mark, right, in Hermit Bingo?
Yeah, and
the lost love.
Usually I figure it's a hermit trope. Some of these guys, the whole thing with William Woodruff, if you remember back to the William of the Fiery Flowers episode, he was supposed to have had this girlfriend and unrequited love, and he took a vow of silence and went off to the woods and, became a hermit. And we don't know if that's true or not, or if just some newspaper reporter just made up that story because it was a good story. We don't know with him. And when I kind of thought the same thing, I kept reading like, oh, his wife died and he went to become a hermit. However, we did find notice of a marriage of a G. Frederick G.E. Thomas. It's got to be him.
Yeah, the extra initials are helpful.
Yeah. To a Mary Leadham in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 1889. And we found their marriage license.
He was older when he got married for the first time. She had already been married and had children, right?
I think we saw that, yeah. I know she had been married. So here's the marriage license. I don't know if there's any information worth reading on that. We actually have a copy of his marriage license.
Yeah, it's either 43 or 45 when he was married for the first time. He has a beautiful signature, by the way.
Yeah, his penmanship's very nice.
So it's not someone who...
didn't know how to read or write.
Yeah, exactly.
So you found this marriage license, Alison. I'd been researching this guy while you were researching last week's episode, The Ghoul of Gettysburg. I was researching this, and I'd been through everything I thought I could find on the guy. And you're kind of going over my notes and looking some other things up, and all of a sudden you say, oh, I found his marriage license. How did that happen? Like how? Yeah, I kind of want to give an insight into the research process as we go along here a little bit.
I don't know.
It was just dumb luck, really.
I think it was dumb luck, or I think we had found the notice in the paper for. Did we find the notice in the paper?
There is
that he
a
had
notice
married?
in the paper.
And
yep.
then I think I added a wife with the first name Mary, which doesn't really narrow anything down in that time period, but I think that was the key.
What appears they lived in Harrisburg.
I'm guessing not in a cave.
No, I don't think so. How or when Mary Thomas died, we're not sure. She doesn't have GFGE, she doesn't have 4 initials. So a Mary Thomas is a lot more common. So how or when Mary Thomas died, we're not sure. There's a note of a Mary Ann Thomas dying in Harrisburg in April of 1891, but we are unsure if this is the same Mary Thomas that was married to Herr Thomas. However, by the early 1890s, Thomas bought a small strip of land on Wolf Hill, just outside of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. There he lived in a cave, or some called it a cave-like hole in the ground, before he built a rude shack, and eventually he built a more proper cabin, cutting all of the logs and doing all of the work himself, including digging a well.
I'm imagining that Alone series where you just send people out with basically no supplies and they just kind of start from scratch. Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, I mean...
Except for you own the land?
Yeah.
So if he had enough money to own the land, presumably he would have had enough money to just either buy a little house, or he wouldn't have had to live in a cave?
I mean, we don't know. Maybe he spent every cent he had just buying the land, and he had to do the rest himself. It's hard to know. However, George Frederick Thomas, the Hermit, lived on Wolf Hill for the rest of his life. Some articles said he had a pet chicken.
It's a daring move on Wolf Hill.
Others said he had a dog that would pull his cart to town.
Pull his cart?
Mm-hmm. He had a little cart. And if you look up, because I was trying to find what the carts looked like, because I found a piece of iron in the area where his cabin was. I wanted to see if it could have been part of his cart. It was too new to be his. It was just a piece of iron that came off of farm equipment or something later on. But I was looking at carts from the late 1800s, and if you look them up, dog carts will come up. It was a semi-regular thing, I guess, for people to have a dog that pulled a little cart. And I guess if you went to town, you had a little cart full of wares, or you were going shopping or something, you have a little dog cart. And
that's an adorable concept. This would be a good time to do a perfect puppy ad.
Yet another article said he had a pet cat.
Oh, so many of the hermits have cats.
Yeah.
Gentle souls.
He would become known as an excellent archer, perhaps the best in Pennsylvania.
So how close to the actual Gettysburg battlefield is this?
Well, some of the articles said he lived on a remote part of the battlefield. So Wolf Hill was in the Battle of Gettysburg. Again, with these articles, I wasn't sure what they meant by living on the battlefield. Did they just mean he lived close?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these articles, they'll say, for instance, he lived in a cave. Well, is a cave a pile of rocks that he made temporarily, as a shelter?
Mm-hmm.
Is a cave a hole in the ground?
Is it like a naturally occurring...
Is it a rock outcropping, or is it a cave, an actual cave?
Yeah, and for the people who haven't had the chance to visit Gettysburg, I think that's one of the more unusual parts of that terrain, is that there are so many places, kind of like Devil's Den, where there are these big formations of rocks that are just kind of smushed next to each other.
And just boulders
that kind of just crop up out of nowhere and make like little mounds. And they would be really easy to kind of go into one of those and hide out if you needed a quick shelter, I think.
Yeah. In fact, there were a couple candidates that we looked at that were just kind of overhangs, that if you needed to, you could get in there and get out of the weather for a short period of time, So we didn't know what they meant by a cave, and I didn't know exactly what they meant by living on the battlefield. But generally, he becomes this kind of known character around Gettysburg. He's written about in the newspaper. People kind of know him. He does odd jobs for people around town. The Adams County Almshouse records indicate that he was admitted on January 29th, 1909. Some articles suggest he was at the almshouse because he presented an agitated condition. He only stayed for 5 days. He was discharged February 3rd, 1909, and returned to his cabin. So we're about to read some articles about him. Before we read these articles, I want to say there's quite the strange familiars twist to this story, as we shall see. But let's go ahead and read some articles, and then we'll comment more as we go along. The Adams County Independent from Littlestown, Pennsylvania, published a brief article on the Wolf Hill Hermit on December 1st, 1901.
Living in a remote part of the battlefield of Gettysburg is an old man, 60 years of age, who has lived entirely alone for many years. His name is Frederick Thomas, and ever since the death of his wife many years ago, he has made his abode as far from the habitation of his fellow man as possible, and in the wildest places he can find. About 6 years ago, he bought a small strip of woodland in the midst of a large grove about 3 miles from this place. His first home was a cave in the ground and small hut, which he built from the trees which he cut on his land. But about 3 years ago, with an incredible amount of labor and entirely unassisted, he succeeded in building himself a 1-story cabin of logs, which he cut and trimmed himself. After completing his cabin, he dug a well. When seen by a correspondent a few days ago, he was sitting in his cabin with his pet, a little chicken, the only other living thing near. On being asked why he lives alone, he said, "I'm never alone. I always have my God, and besides, I love the quiet."
So we have the mention of his wife, and the death of his wife. We have the mention of these 3 different abodes he lived in. Cave, kind of a rude shack, and then his cabin, his more permanent cabin.
A well.
And
Looks like he made a well.
And the mention of the well, yes. So keep those in mind as we go on.
And his
here.
pet chicken.
One of at least 3 pets we know he had. A little over a year later, the Hermit Thomas is recognized for his expertise in archery.
The most primitive hunter, as well as the most remarkable marksman in Pennsylvania is, it has just been learned, Frederick Thomas, a hermit who lives on the Gettysburg battlefield. Thomas shoots birds and rabbits with bow and arrow. So expert has he become, he seldom misses a shot. He subsists almost entirely upon game killed in this manner. Because of the death of his wife, the only person on earth he cared for, Thomas deserted the world, and about 10 years ago he came to this place and bought a small home plot of woodland. His first home was a hole in the ground, and a small cave hut. 3 years ago, entirely unassisted, Thomas succeeded in building himself a 1-story cabin of logs. I think this is interesting because you told me that as a kid, your grandfather was such a great shot because they grew up in West Virginia really poor and the family didn't eat if he didn't catch something.
He was the oldest of, I think, 12 kids.
Yeah, some insane amount of children.
A lot of kids, yeah. And when he was 12 years old, they put a shotgun in his hand. And this is the story, and said, go get dinner. If you don't, we don't eat tonight. And supposedly he was an excellent shot because of that. The article about him being an archer was actually carried by a lot of different newspapers throughout the region.
I wonder if he didn't learn that skill when he was in the military or just growing up in Germany.
I don't know. I don't know if they would have taught archery in the German military. I don't know when or where he picked up that skill. Arrow heads would have been available, but you would have had to make your own arrow shafts, which, interestingly enough, while we were there, John found a plant that he said you would use to make arrow shafts.
Oh, isn't that handy?
Yeah. So that was in the area. Archery hadn't made a big revival yet for hunters.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 30 years post-Civil War, basically?
And, as we'll hear going forward, he did have some firearms, but apparently he was an expert marksman with a bow. So very interesting guy.
Certainly for a self-made man, the arrows make more sense. Less expensive than the upkeep on rifles or bullets. And
because as you're shooting small game, you're not shooting them with a pointed arrow. Usually you have a blunt tip and you're stunning them or sometimes killing them with a blunt tip. So you probably easier to reuse that arrow, I would think, as opposed to a firearm. And you get one shot and then that's done. So I couldn't find any more about the hermit until February of 1909, when he's found dead in his cabin. On February 22nd, 1909, the Gettysburg Times announced the hermit's suicide. In this article, we come across the first reference to hypnotism in the hermit story. This is from the Gettysburg Times, February 22nd, 1909. Suicide on Wolf's Hill. George E. Thomas, hermit of Wolf's Hill, afraid of hypnotist and enemy, hangs himself to rafters and dies alone. The victim of fear of an imaginary enemy, GFGE Thomas, better known as Old Man Thomas, was found dead Sunday morning, hanging from the rafters at his home on Wolf's Hill, near town. The dead body was discovered Sunday morning by Bernard Hoffman and Jacob Raffensperger. These men were taking a walk in the neighborhood of his home and thought they would go over and talk with him a while. They found the door bolted and looked in the windows of the lower room. Then they tried to see into the attic, which formed the upper story of the house. They were horrified to see his body, almost in a sitting posture, suspended from the rafters by a thin strap tied around his neck. Thomas's feet were on the floor, and he was within a few inches of sitting on the floor. He was fully clothed and had on his felt boots, which he always wore in the winter. County authorities were notified once by the men who found the man, and Stuart Foster Beard of the county home went out shortly after dinner Sunday to get the body. He had to force in the front door. After gaining entrance, he hurried to the upper floor, thinking that there might still be some life in Thomas. The condition of the body showed, however, that he had been dead for several days. He was last seen alive at the home of Oscar Deerdorf in Straben Township Tuesday night. The body was taken to the county home to be prepared for burial. No inquest was held. The hermit was in constant dread during the past few weeks of a foe who, he claimed, was hypnotizing him, and Thomas besought numerous Gettysburg friends to help him get rid of the enemy, who he said was putting his life in danger. One day last week he came into Gettysburg, found Constable Wilson, and told him that the man who was tormenting him was surrounded on Wolf's Hill, and that Mr. Wilson should go out and get him. Knowing that the old man's mind was deranged, he told him he would come as soon as he could get a team. On the hermit's person was found a book in which he had written, "Have I not right to protect myself from the one lone enemy trying to make a living without work?" The idea that someone was trying to harm him did not take possession of the little man, who was a familiar figure on the streets of Gettysburg until a short while ago. Until then, his mind was clear, and he was an interesting character. He was a county charge, having lived at the almshouse for a while, but lately lived in his cabin on Wolf's Hill, being on the outdoor relief. Old Man Thomas was a native of Germany, having come to the United States about 37 years ago. He was 62 years of age at the time of his death. He had long resided in this neighborhood and was often seen in town. He was short of stature, with a sandy beard and mustache, and always wore high boots, leather in summer and felt in winter. He frequently pulled a wagon after him. He was a man of some intelligence and was a great reader. In his home were found a number of firearms, some ammunition, a few articles of furniture, and various other belongings. On his person were found the sum of $2.45, the book in which he had written about the one lone enemy, some religious literature, and several pieces of cardboard on which were printed "In hoc signo vinces." He owned property in which he lived and left a will bequeathing all he owned to the county, thus ensuring him a proper burial. Marks on his body showed that he had struggled during his dying moments, but his position would have allowed him to free himself. The strap with which he hanged himself was less than an inch in width. Old Man Thomas will be missed here. He did work for a number of parties in town, making garden and doing odd tasks. He was an interesting talker, having served in the German army and having had many unusual experiences. In hoc signo vinces is Latin for "in this sign you shall conquer," or "in this sign you shall prevail," depending on the translation. And that is based on Constantine's vision before a very decisive battle was given a vision of a cross in the sky, and that phrase in Latin, "in this sign you shall conquer." And the fact that they are finding this on several pieces of cardboard around his cabin.
Protection symbols, right?
Exactly. It just screams powwow to me. It really does. And while I didn't find the phrase in the Long Lost Friend or similar books, I looked in the 6th and 7th books of Moses, I looked in Egyptian Secrets. Those three are the general big ones for powwow. That doesn't really mean anything because there's lots of people who did powwow with no books, and the information would be passed down from person to person, or they would have their own charms and so forth. It is very much the kind of charm which a powwow doctor would employ. The fact that they're saying it's written on pieces of cardboard and found around his place. I asked Brother Richard about the phrase, and he had this to say: "Since the time of Constantine, it's been used as a form of exorcism and a way of repelling curses, the evil eye, demonic activity, etc. The sign is the cross, but in the Chi Rho Greek form. You've seen this. It looks like a P, almost like with X's.
Yeah,
over it. And that indicates the cross, but also the first two initials of Christos, which is Christ in Greek. It has definitely been used in many recognized blessings and Christian folk remedy magic since then, usually with the cross being drawn over the affected area placed as a ward against evil. So
he's sort of holed up in his safe space.
With charms, perhaps.
Charms.
Yeah, doing charms. Some magical thinkers, magical scholars, have connected the phrase to the magical Seder square, which absolutely does appear in the Long Lost Friend. Very important.
Oh, I know that. Seder, tenet, opera.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a protection charm, which absolutely does appear in the Long Lost Friend.
You can also use it for Wordle.
In Hoc Signo Vincus also appears in the diagram of the Cosmic Rose by German alchemist Heinrich Kunrath.
Oh.
And Strange Familiar's patron also noted on Discord that Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa has a seal in his 3 books of occult philosophy, Book 3, Chapter 3, that's from about 1533 or so, which shows the Chi-Rho symbol surrounded by the words in Hoc Vincus, in this conquer. For what it's worth, both Kunrath and Agrippa were German, as was Herr Thomas. So could he have brought some occult knowledge with him from Germany? We cannot know, but it really seems like he was doing powwow. On February 24th, 1909, the Gettysburg Star and Sentinel printed this article.
George Frederick Thomas, the hermit, takes his own life. George Frederick Thomas, the German hermit, who had his abode on Wolf's Hill for a number of years, committed suicide by hanging himself in his house about 1/2 mile south of the Bonneville Road. The body was discovered suspended from the ceiling of his house by Bernard Hoffman, Jacob Raffensperger, and John Rubinstein about 12 o'clock. Messrs. Hoffman and Raffensperger were taking a stroll on the hill when they and Mr. Rubinstein were informed that he had been to Thomas's house but was unable to make himself heard, and that the home was locked on the inside. Thinking that he might be ill and helpless, the 3 men went to the house, and after failing to gain admittance, Mr. Hoffman succeeded in reaching the second-story window and was startled to see the lifeless body of the hermit hanging as above noted. Messrs. Hoffman and Raffensperger notified District Attorney Neely, who deemed an inquest unnecessary, and notified Steward Beard of the county house. The remains were taken to the home and buried in the county burying lot on Monday. From the appearance of the body, Thomas had been dead for several days. He was last seen on Tuesday. It is said that Mr. Thomas was the victim of fear of an imaginary enemy who he claimed was hypnotizing him and putting his life in danger. This evidently preyed on his mind and is supposed to have been the cause of his rash act. He was a German by birth and came to this country about 40 years ago. On his person were found the sum of $2.45, the book in which he had written about the one lone enemy, some religious literature, and several pieces of cardboard on which were printed in hoc signo vincus. He owned the property in which he lived and left a will bequeathing all he owned to the county, thus ensuring him a proper burial.
On the same day, the Gettysburg compiler printed the following article, which gives additional information and a different spin to the situation. Thomas, Wolf Hill hermit, ends his life in attic of his hut by hanging himself, had become mentally deranged recently, imagining himself persecuted. Thomas the hermit, in the loneliness of his hut on Wolf Hill, ended his life last week by hanging himself from a rafter with a strap. The gruesome discovery was made by Jacob Raffensperger and Bernard Hoffman. They came to his place and, finding the door locked, went around his house, looking in all the windows, and finally saw the body hanging in the attic. They notified the authorities, and Sunday afternoon, Foster Beard, steward of the almshouse, went to the hut of Thomas the hermit and had to force open the door to gain entrance. He found the body in a cramped position with feet touching the floor. He cut down the body. The indications were that he had been dead several days, as putrefaction had begun. Thomas the hermit had lived many years on Wolf Hill, living a quiet life, disturbing no one, and telling little about himself. Of late he has been growing more and more loquacious, and apparently daffy. He complained that neighbor boys had been annoying him, making confusion, and that they would travel around his house, peer into his windows, and make noises. He made the assertion that he knew who they were, and if it wasn't stopped, he would put a spell on them and declare that he was able to hypnotize them. He wept bitterly some weeks ago over the loss of his cat, which he said had been killed by his persecutors, and that the cat had been his companion, the only live thing about his house, and he was distressed over the loss. Some years ago, he had a dog, which he would harness to a small wagon and make the trip to town, to and from his hut. He finally decided to go to the county home, and after being there some days during January, longed for his lonely Wolf Hill hut, and being promised outdoor relief, went back to his hermit life. Thomas the Hermit, or GFGE Thomas, was born in Germany, and according to the papers found in his house, was about 62 years of age. He had come to this country about 30 years ago, being naturalized in Baltimore in 1883, and soon after found his way to Wolf Hill in this county, where he has since lived. There are a number of stories of how he came to live the hermit life, but it is not likely the complete story of his life will ever be known. One of the stories is that he possessed wealth at one time, and that the loss of his money and friends made a hermit of him. He was a man of some intelligence, and would at times talk interestingly of life in the German army, but told very little of his own past life. When in a talkative mood, he could quote scripture at great length. The body was taken to the county home on Sunday by Steward Beard, and on Monday all his belongings were removed there. The steward found on his person the sum of $2.45, and being told that he likely had more money, upon examination of his vest, he found sewn into the lining in the corner of the vest $5. Some years ago, he bought off P.L. Houck a small piece of land on Wolf Hill and erected the small hut in which he lived. He made a will some time ago, giving all he had to the county in order to provide burial for himself. So notice in that article, he was the hypnotist, not the victim. It also noted that he was going to put a spell on his tormentors, which I think is more evidence that he was possibly a powwower or folk magician of some sort. And we also get some more details about his supposed persecutors. Because it's strange familiars, I have to note that things running around your house, knocking on it and looking in the windows, is a very strange thing, and also, accompanies other strangeness, but may or may not have been the neighbor kids. This could be mental illness. This could be something else at this point. He was obviously disturbed, whether he was disturbed by his neighbors or disturbed by his own mind, say.
Mm-hmm. Or some combination thereof.
Exactly. Yeah, we can't say.
Can't imagine that someone living in that capacity wouldn't be the object of a certain amount of ridicule, especially by children.
Yeah. By February 26, 1909, the news had made it down to Emmitsburg, Maryland. This is a short article from the Emmitsburg Weekly Chronicle.
GFGE Thomas of Wolf Hill, known as the Hermit, was found on Sunday morning hanging to a rafter in his cabin by Jacob Raffensperger and Bernard Hoffman. Mr. Thomas was a native of Germany coming to this country many years ago. He was an eccentric gentleman, preferring the solitude of his home in the wilds of Wolf Hill to a more thickly populated community. His home was a rough cabin, which he erected from scraps of boards and tin, and notwithstanding this was noted for its immaculate cleanliness. Freddie was always cordial to visitors, and the gentlemen who found his lifeless body were going to his home to have a chat. They found all doors and windows securely fastened on the inside, so they procured a ladder and ascended to the second-story window, where they were surprised to see the body in an almost sitting posture. A thin strap, which had evidently strangled him to death, was about his neck. District Attorney Neely, who was notified, deemed an inquest unnecessary, and the body was removed to the county home by Stewart Foster Beard. He was last seen alive on Tuesday evening. Several notes were found indicating that he had been in constant dread of some unknown enemy. This is attributed as the cause of his self-destruction. Whether his enemy was real or imagined will remain a mystery, as his secret will be buried with him.
That Foster Beard we would find in some other articles and information on him at one point selling some firearms and so forth. And we were like, well, who was this guy? Why did he end up with his firearms and stuff? But he evidently worked for the county home.
And probably disposed of any property to pay off past debts, I assume.
Yeah, and
you don't get out of the almshouse for free.
to pay for his burial, supposedly. Also, on February 26, 1909, the Gettysburg Times had news of Thomas's burial.
The body of Frederick Thomas, the hermit suicide, was buried in Evergreen Cemetery Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. Reverend W. W. Hartman conducted the services.
So here we have conflicting information. The other article you read said he was buried at the county cemetery, would have been the Old Ulm Cemetery.
Potter's Field, basically.
This article and another note that he was buried in Evergreen Cemetery.
As does his death certificate, right?
I believe so. Find a grave, findagrave.com, so it's a good source if you're looking for dead people. Find a grave indicates that he was buried in the old Ulm Cemetery. We did find his death certificate. It notes that he was a white male, date of birth, don't know, age about 65 years, and it has single, married, or divorced, birthplace, name of father, birthplace of father, maiden name of mother, birthplace of mother, occupation. Across all of that, we're just written don't know, one big don't know.
And who's the informant? Because that's usually the person that helps to fill that out.
Foster Beard.
Oh, so how would he know? The guy that just received him at the almshouse, right?
Yeah. Says medical certification of death, February 21st, 1909. I hereby certify that I attend the deceased from, I saw the dead body on February 21st. Cause of death, hanging. In parentheses, it says suicide, H.S. Does that mean himself?
I don't know.
Yeah. Signed by Hartzman, physician of the County Almshouse, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Place of burial, Evergreen Cemetery, says on this. And undertaker is H.B. Bender of Gettysburg. So here we have different information. Where was he buried? Was he buried in the Ulm Cemetery? Was he buried at Evergreen Cemetery?
I'd like to note here that Tim took me over to Gettysburg, and when people say, why isn't Alison ever in any of the on-site episodes? It's because I remain on the cutting room floor. Tim gave me a needle, and then he sent me out into basically a 2-square-mile haystack and said, go find this guy.
Well,
shockingly, we didn't find him.
It was a very cold and windy day, as many of these days have been.
And it's interesting that they also follow the week that he died.
Yeah.
And this will probably air the exact day that some of these articles were in the newspaper.
We looked for him, and we did not find him. And that's why there's not much from that footage. It's just kind of us walking around the cemetery, not finding anything. I do have an email into Evergreen Cemetery, and it is my hope that they can tell us where he's buried and if he has a marker. The almshouse records themselves, we do have the almshouse records. And they have the date of his admission, as I said before, and his release. And they note in the almshouse records that he was buried in Evergreen Cemetery. Again, it says buried Evergreen Cemetery. So most everything points to him being buried in Evergreen Cemetery.
Which is the big civilian cemetery near the National Cemetery.
Right by the National Cemetery, on Cemetery Hill, there in Gettysburg.
Which we hadn't been there in quite a while, actually. I forgot how many of the names there correspond to people within the battle.
Yeah.
I found a lot of people that just their names were familiar.
On March 10th, 1909, the Gettysburg compiler printed an article concerning Thomas's will.
The Will of Wolf Hill Hermit. GFGE Thomas, the Wolf Hills hermit, who killed himself recently, left a will which has been probated. The will was written by himself and is without witness. It states, at opening, will mate by myself at the 24th day of December, 1905, and then goes on to state that the poorhouse will have this property. This body of mine shall rest in the grave here at Gettysburg, and not sending it to the dissection room. And as God has given me time to live, so let me live. Then he names 3 neighbors to whom his property cannot be sold, and that no matter to what persons those names cannot buy it.
So if we could find his will, which is another needle in the haystack search, we might know the names of the neighbors that were bothering him, because I'm thinking those were the people he named in the will.
It's curious that he was well aware of the instances of impoverished people not being properly buried, but ending up in the dissection room.
Yeah. So that is the end of Herr Thomas's story? No, it's not. 2 years later, almost 2 years to the date from his death, February 4th, 1911, the Adams County News published the following article. Wolf Hill Fire, a mystery. The burning of the Thomas Hermitage on Sunday night remains unexplained. Theory of incendiarism is advanced by people of vicinity. The real cause of the fire that was seen by many of our town people on Sunday night has aroused much speculation of thought and seems as yet to be clothed in a veil of mystery. It will be recalled that several years ago, Herr Thomas, better known as the Hermit of Wolf Hill, owned a little property just beyond Rock Creek, on the west slope of Wolf Hill. Mr. Thomas was a frequent visitor in Gettysburg and was often seen on our streets with his little two-wheeled cart drawn by his faithful dog, gathering rags and gumshoes, which he marketed and by this means provided sufficient capital to meet his scanty requirements. On Sundays, Mr. Thomas received many visitors at his hermitage and delighted in talking over his possession of the estate he had acquired by hard labor. It consisted of about a half-acre of ground and the hermitage. About a year ago, the hermit died, leaving a will by which he devised his estate to the county. The property was sold and remained unoccupied for some time. Then it was leased by John Hart, who occupied it in intervals up until the time it was burned. Since the death of the hermit, some of the people living in the neighborhood have reported strange happenings about the old place. The tramps, who have for years frequented their rendezvous along Rock Creek near McAllister's Mill, took up quarters at the hermitage, but it did not last long. They are said to have heard funny noises, and after several strange experiences, vacated the place. Some of the Wolf Hill inhabitants report nightly visits of the place by a specter, supposed to be the disembodied spirit of the hermit. Many stories are told about the old place, but no one seems to know the real cause of the fire. One thing is certain, it burned, and there was no one in the place when it burned. All that can be recorded of the disaster might be, a little lowly hermitage it was, down in a dale, hard by a forest side. A hermit. Spells, hypnotism, strange happenings, funny noises around his abandoned cabin, and a mysterious fire. I had to go find it. Or at least try. If there was anything left at all, this was a needle in a haystack search. But the papers gave me a starting point. Wolf Hill, across Rock Creek from town. The articles noted that he lived on the battlefield, but did he really, or was it just somewhere close? The fire, or some sign of the fire, would have been able to be seen from town, either smoke or maybe reflections on the clouds or something. Remember, there was a lot less light pollution back then, so it would have been easier to see something like that. So the first thing to do is to look at modern maps of Wolf Hill. And initially I'm looking at this and I thought, I'm going to have to do a dangerous creek crossing from the battlefield and to get into the woods at Wolf Hill. But then I found an obscure and seldom visited part of the battlefield called Neal Avenue. It's not a road. When they call it an avenue, it's not a road. It's just a mown section between stone walls within the woods. It's on Wolf Hill. Websites say it is a rather rough hike to get to.
Would you say that's accurate?
Not by strange familiar standards, but your average tourist ain't going to go here.
Yeah, because everything else is pretty accessible.
They are not going to go here.
There's a lot of paved trails.
Yeah, this is...
There'd be no reason to go there, right? Are there any monuments?
There are monuments there. There are absolutely monuments there. And once you get to the part, it looks like other parts of the battlefield. But getting there, it's not an easy hike. It's not.
I'd be curious. This is one avenue I don't think we delved into in this, but I wondered what kind of actual fighting or deaths happened along this area.
It's given on the monuments, and I read them on the on-site locations.
Oh, I wasn't related to that.
Yeah. So, yeah, this isn't a bad hike by strange familiar standards. Usually, I don't know how Chad finds these hikes that are uphill both ways. I don't know how he manages to do that. This is a downhill hike into a creek valley and then back up the hill. You kind of make a U. You walk down to Rock Creek and make a U up. There's no trespassing signs everywhere, but the websites I read said that's the only way to get into the area. So I don't know what to tell people.
I would say that the Moan, M-O-W-N, the Moan Avenue is probably National Park Service
It
property.
is, and it's marked as such. It's marked.
As long as you stay on that, I would think you'd be within your rights.
Yeah, you have to go through this path, and like I said, there's no trespassing signs. If you're worried about that, I don't know how to tell you to get there. But in any case, we went. So
with a nebulous authority in tow.
So after I looked at modern maps of the area, the next thing to do was try to find an old map of the area. A lot of these old maps will show dwellings, and some of them even have the names of the property owners. They'll have them like written there. Very useful. And the problem was I could only find maps before 1870 and after 1911. So this is outside the window of the time the hermit would have been there.
But there was a record of who he bought it from, right?
There was, and I just realized that as I was reading it, and that would have helped. But finally, after like looking and looking and looking, I located a map of the battlefield from 1896, which would have been about the time they were making it a park, right?
Yeah, I think it's 1895 is the official start date, something around there.
Right, so this probably would have been drawn up right around that time.
To give to visitors.
This looks more like a survey map.
Oh, okay.
The homes are marked on there, but they're not with names. They're just kind of squares. And I found on that what I believe would be a good candidate for the location of the Hermit Thomas's home. It was across the creek west of the town of Gettysburg on Wolf Hill. The old map showed a tiny square, just a tiny, tiny square unlabeled. It was smaller than other dwellings marked on the map. So I sent an image of the 1896 map to Jon, and being the clever person he is, he overlaid that on the modern map, matching Rock Creek and some other things on the map as best he could. And we saw the tiny square was pretty near Neal Avenue. So on February 12th, 2022, about 113 years after the hermit's death, 111 years after the cabin burned, Jon and I made our way to Wolf Hill in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, for a needle in a haystack search for any sign of the cabin. I think we go down this way. I think. So we're pursuing a hermit's hut or the remains thereof, or cabin or something, but it's on a place called Wolf Hill in Gettysburg. Also on Wolf Hill is supposed to be the hardest part of the battlefield to get to. It's called Neal Avenue. So kind of killing two birds with one stone as far as that goes. Jon's with me today.
Hey guys.
And we'll see what we see. There was a foundation right as we were coming down the trail. So there's a private trail, I guess, or a public trail rather, in between private property that leads to this Neal Avenue. And there is a foundation right at the start, and Jon said, well, maybe that's it. That would be a huge letdown if that ends up being. I left that. Can you access that map?
Yeah.
On here?
Which?
That blue map basically that you sent, that overlay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so like.
So I left the paper map in the car. But
Flat saddle. Where was the thing on this map that you felt like? So hard to see right now.
yeah. That.
Okay, that.
Yeah, that square.
Gotcha. The tiny little speck there right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only thing that resembles a structure anywhere near where I think this thing actually was. Yeah, I mean, the one article says it's like pretty rough going. Chad was all excited to do a creek crossing. Like, yeah, we're gonna have to do a creek crossing to get in there. But now I found another one. There's a mill down here along the creek. Well, remnants of a mill. Yeah. That was a Underground Railroad site. That's on private property, but they do have a place that manages tours for it. I asked Alison if she could use her Underground Railroad connections to get us a private tour.
see what the GPS has us.
Yeah.
I don't think we're on the trail, so to speak. Well, it's hard to say. If we go to here, so theoretically, 3 separate maps going here.
We kind of got to follow straight.
Okay, well then that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we'd be basically hanging the left.
Yeah, now do we go left here or do we go down further? It seems like we should be going down further, but...
Yeah.
They said there would be basically trespassing signs on either side of the trail,
Yeah,
but the trail was okay to follow.
that makes sense.
I hear the creek.
Yeah.
Here's the National Park Service boundary, so we're right. We're good. I think we're going to go this way now. We met the creek.
Yeah.
I believe that across there is the dump where they dump the like highway materials and stuff.
That's great.
And I think that mill is down this way. Just walk to the creek and look that direction. So this is Rock Creek. The Callister Mill would have been along the creek that way. And that's a, again, it's an Underground Railroad site. So they were hiding escaped enslaved people, formerly enslaved people, I suppose, if they escaped. They were hiding them under the actual mill wheel. That place. I love paranormal stories, but man, Underground Railroad stuff is, talk about brave.
Super impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think about my slight anxiety over potentially trespassing versus
Right.
what they must have been feeling.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, I'm going to get yelled at. They were going to get either killed or re-enslaved.
Right. Right. And even the people helping them could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because of the Fugitive Slave Act.
So much turkey tail. God.
There's that.
Take a bunch of that for tea, something like that.
Oh, that's still good?
Yeah,
Still
that's in its prime.
Oh, cool. I guess we're doing it compared to the blue map.
Yeah, so where we are, recalculate here, recalibrate. Okay. So if you look where we are, it's kind of straight down.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go back here, kind of straight across, and then the blue map. I mean, theoretically, we should be real close to it.
Yeah.
Straight across. Now, the only question is it slightly down this way or slightly up that way?
My read was that it was slightly
Down
down
a little
this
bit.
way, I thought. As far as like looking at your overlay.
Yeah. I don't know. If you think about it this way, so if there's that dots right there, if we go straight across, it's like slightly down from like the, I guess the lateral, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where over here, if we go straight across, we're down here more. Let's go to the,
Well, you probably wouldn't have put it, like I wouldn't have put it right up against the creek. I would have put it
yeah,
up a little bit.
it's so hard to tell. I feel like we're in spitting distance of it.
Yeah. But I wouldn't have put, like, for flooding, it doesn't make sense to put it right along.
No, definitely not. So we just really need to read the landscape a little bit.
That's why I brought you.
What's out of the ordinary or what?
Supposedly he dug a well, too, so there might be a sign of that. He had a cart, so I'm guessing there was a wide enough path for him to bring his cart to town. The boulders aren't going to move.
No.
The other thing is, when it burnt, they saw the flames or the light from town.
Well, we're not high enough.
Yeah, I'm wondering maybe up there,
Yeah.
but I want to go a little bit further here and see what this. I mean, in your opinion, how lasting are the marks that humans leave on the wood? In other words,
I mean, if they're using stone foundation, I mean, there's a pretty good chance we'll be good at something. But it's also entirely possible that, depending on how it was built, the back could be covered by. Because what year were we talking that he had this?
he died in 1909 and it burnt in 1911.
Okay, so we're talking over 100 years.
Yeah.
If the structure burnt and all that was left was the stone aspect, assuming there was some stone to it, there may be nothing left.
Right.
I mean, 100 years of leasehold building soil on top of that stone could significantly bury it. Plus, 100 years gives plenty of time for an early succession on trees to grow back and fill in the space where it was. So if it had been more recently, I'd be looking for like where there are trees missing. But that's not going to be the case. If I came out here, I'd camp in that spot right there. Look at that.
Right? Yeah, it's awesome.
That's a nice little boulder hole.
All right, well, let's go back up around because we'll be on parkland up there,
Yeah.
and we can kind of look down from up there, I guess.
I guess when you asked me what his name was, I was really trying to just like put him into my head and kind of picture living in this space.
He was a German immigrant. He was in the German army. He came through Baltimore in the 1870s. Almost immediately, that's
Deer
deer.
tracks.
Yeah, deer and canine or something.
Yeah, some small fox maybe.
Immediately came up here, bought an acre and a half of this land, and built his cabin. And they called him Herr Thomas. And there's an article about him before he died that mentioned that he was the best marksman in Pennsylvania with a bow and arrow.
Wow.
And he hunted birds and rabbits and squirrels with a bow and arrow.
If you would have no end of that, it's very unusual.
Yeah, so one thing I forgot to look up was did they make manufactured arrows in the late 1800s, early 1900s, or was he
The bow, you're also. That's interesting.
was he making his own?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. One thing to be the best archer in Pennsylvania with modern equipment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite another. If you're making your own arrows.
Well, I've made my arrows.
I know.
And I actually find I'm a better shot with those than I am with modern.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Why is that?
Well, so
Like, for me, there's a woo factor there.
there is a woo factor. This
Okay.
is going to sound a little nuts, but in a lot of ways, when you shoot an arrow, you're shooting with your mind.
Right.
And I don't do a whole lot of like meticulous aiming. It's more about feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so the main difference between a traditionally made arrow and a modern arrow is that, and you can look at this if you look at modern bows, the way that it's offset. You'll even see some bows that are sort of cut out for the arrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Because a naturally made arrow, when you put it on your bow, when you pull back, the arrow actually bends around the bow, whereas the modern arrow will not bend around. It's too rigid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why your manufactured bows are often made with a cutout so that the bow can go straight because it won't bend.
Right,
But your naturally made arrows literally curve as it goes around the bow and then go straight. Yeah, it's interesting.
No, I honestly feel like there's a woo factor there because you made it, and the best archers will tell you that it's an extension of your arm.
100%.
Yeah, and
100%.
you're just carrying your arm essentially
Yeah.
outward. And I
like
feel
when
like if you make something,
when I shoot a bow, when I shoot a modern bow, there's like a little sight for you to aim. With your traditionally made bows, you don't have that.
right?
And so I'm almost like visualizing hitting the target.
Yeah.
And you hit it.
Well, that's what I think the best archers will tell you. That's how to do it, essentially. Like, yeah.
And I'm not by any stretch like an expert
right.
bow maker or archer, but
When there was an archery team in high school that I tried out for, I had my own bow. I basically just wanted to see how I stacked up against them. I didn't join the team, but I went out there and they said, "Aren't you going to wear your glasses?" I said, "I don't need my glasses. I can see the outer ring of the bullseye.
Yeah.
I know what I want to hit is in the middle of that ring. That's all I need to know." And I did very well. They said, why are you not joining the archery team? Well, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so I didn't need to see necessarily exactly what I was aiming for. It was more like just knowing. Like I know where I'm aiming.
I mean, I think it's entirely possible he was making his own arrows out here. I mean, I don't know really much about what his lifestyle would have been, whether he would have been traveling to town, so to speak, on a regular basis. Or...
I mean, apparently he did. He was known in town.
Okay.
Like I said, as Herr Thomas, and he had a cart he would bring to town. I think he did odd jobs for people here and there.
So why would he have a hair Thomas? What does that mean?
It was like the German hair, like Mr. Herr Thomas.
Oh, I got you. I was picturing him with like crazy hair. And,
No, they said he was a short fella, sandy-colored hair.
well, here we are at Neil Avenue.
I've not found a. See, this seems like if it were me,
Yeah.
in more up here.
Everywhere we were hiking down there is pretty much floodplain,
Yeah,
without a doubt.
yeah. Probably can't go too far here, but we can go a little bit. See what we see. The blue map from 1896 is the year they basically made the battlefield a national park, I think. This little area up here looks interesting. I just want to.
So that structure spot on that map, that's not confirmed that
Not
that was his.
confirmed. It's just a dot on the map.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. There are other houses on the map, and that one looks like a smaller dot of a house.
Yeah.
So I have a drawing of him from one article, and the door of his house, and it does look like it was up against some boulders.
It would make sense to use that natural, use the landscapes as a guide.
Yeah, give you a back wall, right?
Yeah,
start
wind
out.
protection.
And they said first he lived in a cave. Then they said he built a kind of a rude shack, and then they said he kind of expanded it. So there are some outcroppings that.
This certainly seems like an ideal spot because you're up higher than the creek, but you're not way up on the hill where you're going to get all that wind. A little bit of protection in this layer.
Yeah.
Lots of privet growing here.
Explain.
Which is one of our good bow making arrow woods.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask. Okay. All right. So, trees this size
Yeah.
could have come up
Yeah.
in the interim?
Yeah, that's trying to see the leaves up there. My bark identification is not what it should be. But I mean, black locust is a fast growing one. I don't think this is a black locust, but they grow here and they can get this big in 75 years. So yeah, I would say that tree's under 100 years old for sure. So
Okay. All
probably
right.
was not growing when he was here.
Right. I don't know if your eyes are any better than mine, but is that a mylar balloon across the creek there, hanging in the tree, just to note?
It certainly is. It seems to be blue.
Yeah, I mean, it is, especially this sort of flat area, I feel like it's a good candidate. But,
Yeah.
I mean,
Obviously we have no way to say for sure, but
Yeah.
it feels right. It feels like a good possibility.
yeah, and if you were, like I said, if you were just going to use the boulders as the back wall of your cabin.
I mean, if I'm going to build a cabin on a hillside like this, I want protection from wind and protection from water. And this spot would certainly give us both.
Boulders don't move, right?
Not,
So they're going to...
not without a severe incident.
Yeah, so these formations, more or less would have been there.
Yeah. It's possible they could have been more or less exposed at that time.
Right, yeah.
But, and some cracking can occur, but generally speaking, these would have been here.
So in this next section, we'd been there, we'd looked around, we kind of made some guesses. Maybe it was here, maybe I would have built a cabin here, maybe I would have built a cabin there, but we hadn't really found anything definite. And I was kind of resigned to that. It's a needle in a haystack search. What's going to be left after over 100 years?
And a fire.
And a fire. You can hear me in this recording. I say out loud to the Hermit, if you'd like to make an appearance or give us an EVP, now is the time. Immediately, you hear the wind pick up. And immediately after that, I look over and I say, what's that? Doesn't that impression in the ground look interesting? And we find the foundation. This segment is not edited. It happens that quickly. You can hear it all in this segment.
Was he doing any kind of, I know he was hunting. What was he doing for other types of food? Was he trading with the townspeople? Was he growing?
I think so, because they said he was a regular fixture in town and that he did odd jobs for people sometimes.
Okay.
So I would guess that he supplemented. They did say he had a pet chicken in one of the articles. Now, whether that means he raised chickens or he had the chicken for eggs, or
Yeah.
but he did have a chicken, it seems, if not more than one. Maybe you have your pet chicken and then your food chickens. Didn't seem like he was a vegetarian. He was
Yeah.
hunting.
I like to think he was doing some harvesting of wild foods and making use of the acorns here and
I mean,
Things that were probably more common knowledge back then than they are now.
yeah. Yeah, I don't... I guess the only stumbling block with that would be how different is that sort of stuff here from Germany?
Right.
And would he have had a local teacher to show him, like, you can eat this, you can't eat that, or
Yeah, I'm sure there were some equivalents. I'm sure he was, being German, he was probably definitely mushrooming. Folks that I've met through foraging that have been German, or I know a Kazakhstan couple, and they're just super comfortable with mushrooms, more so than we are over here.
is that a cultural thing?
It's definitely
Just-
a cultural thing. We were kind of raised to be afraid of them, and
Right.
many other cultures were not. And so they seem to have a more natural willingness or ability to find edibles and be safe about it.
Well, let's go look at Neil Avenue and see if any other ideas pop up. Now, is that turkey tail?
No, that's a little shelf mushroom.
Okay.
Some sort of shelf mushroom. And that could be a birch polypore. Oh yeah, there's some more. Yeah, I think this is probably a dead birch tree. Either birch polypore. This has some fire making uses, but not edible uses.
Now, how do you tell the difference?
Well, we're gonna have the turkey tails. I'll show you.
Okay.
Size for one thing. You don't often see a turkey tail get to that size.
So I'm trying to find his will. He had a will.
Okay.
Towards the end of his life, he kept showing up in town and telling the cops that somebody was trying to hypnotize him. And his will apparently named specific neighbors that were not to get his property.
Interesting.
He left his property to the county, I think. But he specifically said, like, these neighbors are not to get my property. I want to find the will because I'm thinking that might be a clue as to who he thought was trying to hypnotize him.
Sure.
If he specifically said,
Yeah.
these are... Now, was this mental illness? But if we find one of his neighbors was into powwow or something,
Yeah.
then we have another story. You know. There's a database of Adams County wills online, but there's no discernible order to them.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
No search function.
Nope, no search function. It's just photographs of each individual page. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pages.
Question of whether you feel lucky.
So right now we're on according to the website, is the hardest to find and most difficult to reach part of the national battlefield in Gettysburg. It's called Neil Avenue. There's apparently one way to get to it,
We found it.
and that path we just took.
Certainly seems like an entrance that you have to know about.
Yeah. But there's monuments here, and this is
Yeah.
certainly battlefield stuff.
A really nice stone wall.
Quite a hill on the other side there. I'm thinking if they saw it from town, they'd had to see the glow, probably, not the actual fire.
Yeah. Or could it be possible that they saw the smoke tower
That's possible.
rather than seeing the actual flames?
I thought they said they saw some, because I thought it was the lights, though. 'Cause they said something
Okay.
about the strange lights on Wolf Hill where the Hermit's house burning or something like that. I'll have to reread the article. But it could have been the smoke. But again, up higher here, gets it even. I mean, would you say we're still on the west of the creek on the east side of Wolf Hill, essentially?
Yeah, it's still going up a little ways.
Okay, so I mean, it's still potential for being somewhere out on either
Yeah,
side of
we're
this.
still going uphill here.
And the higher we get, the more chance there is of them seeing light or reflection or
I
whatever.
mean, you also said that it was located within the battlefield, which makes me wonder if he was more sort of an open area as opposed to in the woodland itself. Unless they were counting the woodland as part of the battlefield as well.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't super specific. You know, I'm guessing they would say battlefield as a general marker, you know, if he was somewhere around it. But just across Rock Creek on Wolf Hill, this is how they put it.
So curious why it's called Wolf Hill and how he got that name.
I think just people named Wolf.
Oh,
We're residents here.
Okay.
So is this, since this is, there's no trespassing on there, okay. I wonder why they left this open though. Seems like an invitation.
It does.
Well, let's walk on up there. We can go in there, you know, if we somebody else is.
Yeah, there's no one around.
Sorry, thought it was the battlefield.
It seemed like it'd be an honest place. Super peaceful up here.
Oh yeah. It's the Army of the Potomac 6th Corps 2nd Division 3rd Brigade. Brigade General Thomas H. Neal, thereby giving this the name of Neal Avenue. 7th Maine, I don't know what COS is, 6.
Oh well.
COS, 43rd Division, 49th, 77th New York, 61st Pennsylvania Infantry. July 2nd, arrived after a march of 33 miles from Manchester, Maryland. Hey, I grew up near there. That's where I went to church as a kid. And about 6 p.m. was detached from the Corps and ordered by Major General G.G. Meade to hold Powers Hill. Later was ordered by Major General H.W. Slocum to support the front line, but at midnight was ordered to Powers Hill. July 3rd, the brigade, by order of Major General Slocum, crossed Rock Creek and took position on the extreme right of the Army, making connection with the cavalry pickets, and encountered and checked the advancing Confederate sharpshooters and skirmishers, and remained until the close of the battle. Casualties killed: one officer, 1 man wounded, 11 men captured or missing, 2 men, total 15.
Doesn't seem too bad considering.
Considering the other, damages. This was not a horrible place to be. I never know how much of these rock walls are extant from the battle, and how many are put here to kind of bring to mind. So when they found him, when he killed himself, he was locked in his cabin, and they said they couldn't open any of the doors or windows. And they had to go through a 2nd-story window to get to him. So it was big enough to have at least a little attic or something up there. You know, it could have been a crawl space, but
How old was he?
62. Which does not sound very old anymore.
No, it does not. And with which manner did he end his life?
He hanged himself. Extreme right of infantry of the Army. Mustered in August 1861, re-enlisted December 1863 to February 1864. Mustered out June 28, 1865. Total enrollment 1987. 1,987. Total killed and mortally wounded. Is that 18 or 10?
18.
18 officers, 214 enlisted men. Wounded 28 officers, 470 enlisted men. Huh, no officers died of disease. How about that?
Interesting.
103 enlisted men died of disease. That's very interesting.
Yeah. It's also interesting. It says mustard in August 1861. Surprised they didn't use ketchup.
So finding things like this is a needle in a haystack search always.
Yeah.
And come to these places with hopes of finding it, but not necessarily any thought that we actually will. We will probably be leaving today without any definite answers, but that was kind of to be expected. But we know we're in the right area.
Yeah.
There's only so many places it could have been to be on the side of Wolf Hill across Rock Creek from town. Why someone back in 1911 would have not predicted that a podcaster in 2022 would be semi-obsessed with hermits and would need to find the location of this hermitage and have not marked it for me is I'm offended. But,
So it's a severe lack of forethought.
right?
It is kind of a fascinating thing, though, to think that he's out here living alone, presumably because he wants to sort of separate himself from people, and to think that 100 years after he's gone, there's still people talking about him and
Yeah.
caring enough to find his story and want to find his place and be in his space.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's the strange familiars preventing the second death of hermits. You know the concept of the second death? Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
My review of Neal Avenue, it's worth the price of admission. It's a cool little place. The hike isn't that bad. They warn you on the website that it's this like treacherous hike. It's not that bad.
We've been through it.
Yeah. I mean, you want to have good shoes on. But beyond that,
Yeah.
it's not that difficult and it's not that long. But it's a cool part of the battlefield that evidently most people don't ever see.
Yeah.
So somebody's mowing it.
Yeah, someone is maintaining it. And
Not maintaining the trail, but the trail isn't part of the battlefield.
well, even
Exactly.
the trail has, you can see where trees have come down and they've been cut.
Yeah.
So it's getting somewhat maintained.
All right, Hermit. Last chance to show up. They said the neighbor said they saw his ghost wandering around.
Wow.
Hermit's ghost. So if he wants to make himself known, or if there's any EVPs you'd like to leave us before we move on to try to find your grave.
We're listening.
See that hole in the ground over there?
Yeah,
That big hole?
I do see that. And if you get it?
I don't see any no trespassing signs right here. That's not a bad candidate, place-wise.
Right.
February is the time to do this too,
Absolutely.
before everything grows up.
It's actually a 50-degree February day.
Oh yeah.
This is a pretty fascinating rectangular shaped hole.
Yeah. This is I mean, I don't know why it would be dug in necessarily, but
Yeah, this was excavated at some reason.
it is a very interesting candidate.
Did you you have any kind of sense of size, like width and length of this?
No. I mean, he wouldn't need a lot.
Right. This is a perfect, like, single space dwelling for someone.
This is a really good candidate right here. Let me take a picture of this.
Yeah.
Once again, in this next segment, we're standing at the foundation, and once again, I said out loud, if we could find a well, we'd know we were in the right place. I look over to my left immediately, and I said, what's that there? And we find the well. This segment isn't edited either. It happened that quickly.
We found just off the battlefield a really good candidate for perhaps the placement of his cabin. It's a very defined rectangular square indentation in the ground. It's not where a tree, it's not like a tree fell over and left that hole.
This is definitely man-made.
Yeah.
A long time ago, too, because it looks like it was dug at some point fairly long enough ago that it's begun to fill in with debris and other things.
Right.
The other thing, too, is when I was originally saying I'd look for, like, a lack of trees, if his place was within the battlefield area, this looks like it was pretty bare.
Yeah.
We also have stone walls entirely around it, and none of the trees I'm seeing are old enough that they would have been here back then. They've grown since.
Wow. So the only other thing, they said he dug a well. I'm sure the water table's pretty high here. You wouldn't have to dig too far.
No, definitely not.
But what about this right here? Look at that.
Look at that.
There we go.
Wow, this is amazing.
That's a well.
That is 100% a well.
We found it. We found it.
The well's even got water in it. You could use this well today.
We found it. The well's giving it away.
I also think it was really fascinating that we were over here about to leave, and you said, anything you want to say to us? And right after that, we both sort of turned this way, and we're like, hey, look at that.
Yeah, I think this is it. I think this is a well. I mean, and I'd put my well next to my cabin, right? Like
100%.
Well, if that was you, Herr Thomas, thank you for the guidance. I mean, wow. Yep, I think we found it. I'm very confident that...
It feels perfect. It feels totally right. Just knowing that...
and like I said, it's a little bit higher, so more chance that if there was flames or something from town... They could...
And yet it's not very... Like I was saying before, I want it down a little bit so you had protection from the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly where we are. Outstanding.
I am very pleased by this. Very pleased. Okay, we're within the national park right here.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're good where we are.
Dude, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just about to give up, and I'm very, very certain that we found it.
Absolutely.
The well, that was what I needed to see. So Jon and I are very confident we found where the hermit lived. It's just off of Neal Avenue. There's a well right there.
As noted, they said he dug his own well. Built his own cabin too, they said. Do the whole thing by hand.
So amazing.
Literally, how often does that, like literally we were just about to walk away and look over and that indentation over there looks interesting. Wow. All right. If we'd have come during the summer, we would. This would have been so grown up, we wouldn't have even seen it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's a rough-hewn stone, but it's definitely squared off.
Well, I'm just saying I found this too here. You dig it down and here's the foundation.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of it, like you see here, a lot of it's got a couple inches of dirt on top of it. But if you wanted to, you could dig out that entire foundation.
Okay.
And
So
you can see parts of it peeking out around the edges.
there's absolutely a foundation here.
Yeah. Here, I bet we'll have. Yeah, look at that. There's stone right there.
I'm happy. I'm happy, John.
I am too.
This is cool. So we took pictures of the well, we took pictures of the foundation.
These are probably foundation rocks right here that are caving in over time.
Yeah, I see that. Yep. All around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to stress once again how amazing it is that we found this foundation at all, much less in the way we found it, than the well. That was a very strange familiars moment for me, and it made me very happy that we were able to, this research panned out and we were checking these boxes. Here's a foundation, here's a well. The location seemed right. We found it. We found where the hermit's cabin was. After that, we went to the Old Elm Cemetery to look for the hermit's grave. So we didn't find any marker at the Old Elm Cemetery. That doesn't mean it wasn't there. He could have had no marker. There's missing markers. You can tell there's some markers that are just gone that were there. But because we found so many references of him being buried in Evergreen Cemetery, my money's on Evergreen Cemetery at this point.
Especially because his will was dedicated to the idea that he would have a proper burial.
Right. Yeah. All that property was just given to the county in exchange for a proper burial. So maybe he even has a small marker. I don't know. Hopefully Evergreen Cemetery will get back to us and we will be able to find the location of his burial. A few days later, Chad and I returned to the area. We went a little later in the afternoon so we could experience dusk on Wolf Hill. In this first clip, Chad finds a spring that's kind of walled up and kind of bridged over, possibly the work of the hermit. It's a road that leads from the area of his cabin down to the creek. There used to be civilian bridges that crossed Rock Creek not too far from there. So it's possible if he just had a little cart pulled by his dog, he could make his way down along the creek and cross at the civilian bridges.
And then make his way into Gettysburg proper.
Yeah, then make his way into Gettysburg proper. Next, we went up to the foundation, and of course, Chad was saying the whole time there should be some evidence of a fire. If the place burned down, there should be some evidence of the fire. There's a couple pieces of wood that look black around there, but that wasn't good enough for Chad. He digs into the leaf cover and finds charcoal there, which satisfies Chad that indeed the place burnt down. The soil is dead black there, and it's kind of brown over here, and if you dig in the foundation, it's just black. Pretty sure that's charcoal. We are back on Wolf Hill, just outside of the town of Gettysburg, making our way to the hermit's house, what's left of it, the ruins of the hermit's house. Chad's with me this time.
Against my will.
It's a very windy February day.
But the wind is just going
whip through
Yeah.
here.
So there's the boundary. See that? We're on the park land right here. Park boundary right there.
Oh, okay. I was looking at the line.
What's that?
Which way do we go?
We need to go this way.
Is that Wolfville itself?
No, we're headed up Wolf Hill. That's just the other side of the creek there. I don't know if it's still considered part of Wolf Hill. The creek divides it, or
Yeah, I didn't know if like the battlefield was there, or like if the edge of town was there, or what.
battlefield is there.
Okay.
That is, you can look at a map. You can see where they come in from the road. It's just a highway place for like the highway crews to come in. He actually lived in 3 different places.
Gotcha.
Here, he had what they call a cave in the ground.
Well, that could be anywhere here.
Yeah. It also might not have been a cave. I gotta tie my shoe. Might have been a. Yeah, that's where we're headed. Could have been a temporary stone enclosure he made for himself that they're calling a cave. Could have been a hole in the ground.
Hey, Tim. I wonder if he did this.
Well, he had a cart he was taking to town.
You see that? That's pretty.
Yeah. He had a small dog cart and a dog that would take his cart to town.
And that would gather water too, which he didn't need because he had the well. But
well, he dug the well later. In my impression.
so you would wall it in like that so it would catch the water off the springs.
Yeah. He could have done that. Certainly. I believe they said he bought. Was it an acre and a half?
I almost think that was man-made down there, where the rocks and all that go over that little spring.
Very well could have been. I think you're right. It looked too jammed up.
Well, that's what you would do.
Yeah.
Dig it out and you wall it in so it didn't flow out.
So this is Neal Avenue. And we have gone all through there, like looking for any sign of it.
Where's this thing?
It just goes up to those woods and stops. Gotcha. And monuments up there.
This was a road at one time, for sure. It's definitely a structure, no doubt
It's the
about that.
foundation for sure. The wall's
Too square not to be.
The wall's falling in. But it's funny because we got here and we were saying, yeah, this is a good candidate. And I said, if only we could find his well. I said, because it said that he dug a well. And I looked over, I said, what's over there? Right afterwards, we walked over and there's the well.
Oh, yeah.
What you got?
Look how black that is.
Fire?
That's exactly what you'd see like when you go to the charcoal pit, the charcoal flats where they burn the charcoal for the forges.
Yeah.
It's right at the surface like that. That's ground, that's not rock. See, there's the rocks.
Yeah.
Yep, this is it. Different color?
Yeah. Yeah, brown.
That's black.
Dead black over there.
That's it.
Yeah.
Or whatever structure was there burnt down.
Yeah. I'd say that's
That's the place. That's pretty definitive. You can't. And it's on the side of the hill.
Yep.
Charcoal doesn't deteriorate.
Okay.
It took a long time for charcoal to deteriorate. I mean, a long time. That's why they find remnants of fires like over 1,000 years.
Gotcha.
So that's like when you go through forge areas in Michaud and you see where they burnt the trees for the charcoal. You can still see the charcoal
Yeah.
flax. And it's right at the surface. Because all that heat just kills everything underneath it. That's what I tell you when you make fires, to make new fires, use existing fire rings. Which road that is. I guess the only way to get in here is really to go the way we went, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless you want to trespass. Like, yeah, so I think we could probably cut across that way and get out a lot quicker, but
I like spots like this that are like forgotten areas of the battlefield.
yeah.
So in this next section, we went up the hill about 100 yards above the cabin foundation. It's one of the only areas that Jon and I didn't check. First, Chad finds an old coffee pot. It's an old enamel coffee pot with the bottom rotted out of it that's kind of sitting on a dead tree or something.
Is it one of those like blue enamel ones or? Like...
Yeah, I think so. I asked him if there were initials on it. Maybe could have been the Hermits. It's old enough, but they also talk about tramps and stuff being in the area. It could have been one of theirs. Could have been anybody else's. But immediately after finding this coffee pot, we find the cave. This cave, someone stayed in. It's not a cave proper. It's a boulder that kind of fell down across some other boulders, making a cave, kind of a stone lean-to, but in a sense. But it's a cave. I would call it a cave. I think any reporter would have called it a cave from the time. Interestingly enough, there's a gap on one side of this cave which has been walled up by hand stacking stones to block the area, and even one area of this wall inside the cave still has mud packed into the rocks. This is the work of a man. This is someone did this. It's stacked up. There is evidence of charcoal again in the cave. So someone had fires in there. There's evidence of smoke at places on the top of the rocks inside the cave, on the ceiling of the cave. There's evidence of candle or lantern smoke, smaller areas where he must have had candles or lanterns where smoke came up. When we walked around the other side of the cave, I looked down and there is a chimney built on the back side of the cave, a very rough chimney built of stone, but something that you could light a fire in the cave and have the smoke go up the chimney. It's still there. This is the cave in which he lived. I'm very, very confident of it. Somebody was spending some time in there a long time ago. We found his cave. We found the foundation of his cabin. We found his well. We know where the Hermit of Wolf Hill lived. It's very exciting to me when research pans out.
Huh. No initials on it, are there?
It's just an old enamel coffee pot. That's all it is. Well, if you're gonna live in a hole in the ground,
This would be nice, right? Yeah. Protection on almost 3 sides.
it's a cave.
Look at that. There's a little cave here. This will be the cave.
Yeah.
Pretty sure we found the cave they mentioned.
Holy that's deep.
Yeah, it goes back a good ways. Feel like going spelunking, Chad? You could definitely make a bed back in there. Sure.
Holy, that's big inside. There's an opening there.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Any sign of habituation at all?
That's one look. Well, that'd be hard to tell.
Yeah. Unless he had a fire up near that opening, maybe. You probably see it on the rocks, I guess.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. This is a very good candidate for his cave, though.
Super good candidate.
Yeah.
It's a little darker right in there. See that?
Yeah.
And there's that. That's kind of sitting there, so it could go out that way.
Yeah.
So you close this end off. You put a fire right in there. You can stay warm in here.
It's already about 4 or 5 degrees warmer just getting in
know.
there. Yeah.
Just getting out of the wind.
Yeah.
And those were laid up there. See that?
Yep. Yeah. To block the wind a little
This
bit.
has to be it.
This is, yeah.
That was all laid.
Yeah,
in there.
he packed it in. Look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not cracked away because it would shear away
Right.
differently.
Yeah. Yeah, he packed that in up there.
And it's close to. So you live here and then build your house down there.
Yeah.
You want to be. I figured it had to be close to the cabin.
So he had 3 he first came to and lived in a cave, they said, a rocky cave. This would be a rocky cave.
Yeah.
And then he made it like a rude cabin after that, and then he made his more permanent cabin.
Did he make the rude cabin where the permanent cabin sat? Or did he make the rude cabin here?
I'm guessing he made the rude cabin maybe up against this. I'm not sure. Because couldn't find a photo, but I found a drawing in the one newspaper.
Of the rude cabin or of the
And it's kind of at him at the front of what looks to be like a door put on a cave, basically. Like, it's hard to tell because it's just a drawing, but it looks like there's rocks behind him. And don't hit your head.
I'm not.
Shine your light over here. Just wonder if we can find any little object or anything. I would.
I think we did. Where do you think that pot came from?
Well, that's what. Yeah.
That anemalware was pretty old. Let me see that.
What, this?
No, right there, where my light's on.
This.
No, the ground. All right, now, yeah, there's charcoal. See that?
Okay.
That's later. You can put a fire in the front too,
Yeah.
so it radiated in.
Yeah.
Okay. This is it. This has to be it.
Hey, look at this. Shine your lit.
Yep, it's dark right there. These were stacked.
Yep, they were definitely
You can
stacked
see
there.
how that's perfectly placed across there.
Yeah.
And then these are put on top of there.
Make a little shelf. Yeah.
Yep, these were stacked. And you could probably, if you did right, you could put logs and stuff across this, just that opening where the opening and the 2 rocks are, and make a cabin up here until you build your one down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where he was staying. Almost guarantee it. This is where he stayed.
Yeah.
Because that's perfectly placed there
Yeah.
to hold all that in. That came from in the back here.
Yeah, this is 1,000% stacked. I
And
mean,
you
look
can
at.
see that. That's laid pretty flat. He'd probably lay up in there. That's from, there's more blackness. That's probably from candles. See that?
Oh yeah.
Or lanterns up in there.
Yep.
This is it. Well, that's cool.
That's super cool. So what we are talking about here is we came up a little bit further up the hill than Jon and I had come before, and there was some nice boulders, and found a little opening. And at first we thought it was just like a little cubby, but it's a cave. I mean, that's
the closest thing you're going to find to a cave here.
Yeah, that would meet the description of a rocky cave. And besides that, there's evidence of fire being inside, both, like Chad said, either candles or lanterns, and it looks like fires on the ground at the entrance, so you wouldn't want to build it way back in there and choke yourself out.
The way that flat rock is back in there,
Mm-hmm.
there's a piece of slate that's pretty flat. That would be a good cooking surface or whatever. I mean, that's where he had it. That's why that one opening is like that.
Yeah, but there's stones stacked up. There's a little gap the way the one rock sits on the other, that he's pretty much filled up with stones. They could have collapsed some over the years. Could have been more filled up in the past, but you can tell it's stacked along here.
Heck yeah, it's much nicer in here than it is out there.
This is where I'd set up.
Yeah.
And it tracks. It's close to the cabin.
Yep. Right. Doesn't that look like a chimney?
Huh?
Doesn't that look like a chimney?
Yeah. That's the side where I saw the other hole. That probably is where, yeah. Remember I said that slab?
Uh-huh.
That's probably is where he had his fire coming out, smoke coming out of there.
Okay. We found, it's like checked off every box as regards to the articles about this stuff. Well, we found the cave, and once again, Herr Thomas, we're about to leave. If there's anything you'd like to show us or present to us, or if you want to walk on through the trees yourself.
Yeah, we are. It's starting the purple of sunset.
Yeah.
Feel free. Just don't shoot us with an arrow.
That is the Hermit of Wolf Hill, rocketed to the top of my hermit's list. Herr Thomas, amazing. I'm so happy. I don't know if that's normal or not, to be that happy that we found his cabin, that we found his well, that we found the cave. But for me, super exciting and fun on site, because all this research pans out. It's like I said, we were just checking these boxes. There's the foundation, there's the well, there's the cave. We found it all. And articles are fairly accurate. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes those articles aren't. So Gettysburg paper, kudos to you. Pretty accurate articles there. I don't know if 90 Days to the Perfect Puppy can teach you to have your dog pull a cart.
I'm absolutely sure they can. I mean, isn't that one of the things that they do with certain breeds of animals?
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, I'm pretty sure they could do that.
I'm just going to put that on the back burner in case we need it. If to become hucksters with a dog cart selling wares.
Sure. Yeah. Can you imagine like a little dog cart and all your old photos hanging on it and kind of open it up and photos for sale?
Yeah, that's how I talk usually when I'm selling photos.
Hey, we got some photos for sale here. You got to use your old-timey voice.
Of course.
Yeah, when you're selling your old-timey photos.
And my name's Bugsy then.
90 Days to the Perfect Puppy can help you with your puppy training needs, whether it's pulling a dog cart or, just...
having them not bite your shoes.
Exactly. Or for potty training or fear and nervousness, barking, crate training, hyperactivity issues, leash training, mouthing and biting, and more. They can help you train your puppy. They can teach you what to do.
And more importantly, what not to do.
You can find 90 Days to the Perfect Puppy at sithappens.us. They have online sources like video lessons. They have a secret Facebook group, which is better than a not secret Facebook group. They have one-on-one options available. Let them help you understand how your dog thinks and apply proactive training methods so you and your puppy can become perfect for each other. Again, you can find them at sithappens.us. Look for the 90 Days to the Perfect Puppy link at the top of the page. So as we're doing these Gettysburg episodes here, leading up to episode 300, I want to remind everybody that Strange Familiars episode 300 is available at our Etsy shop. Our shop name is Lost Grave. If you type in Strange Familiars, our stuff will come up. It's also available at the Stone Breath Bandcamp, stonebreath.bandcamp.com. It's a hardcover book. You buy the hardcover book, it comes with a woven patch and a sticker. You get a download of the audiobook podcast, kind of an audiobook podcast combination. If you'd like our on-site stuff, it's a lot of on-site stuff there. It's a download of some music I did with it. The book is fully illustrated. Soraya came down and we did a follow-up podcast there. You get that as a bonus. All of that comes as a download. If you don't want the book for whatever reason, you can just buy the download. You can get that at stonebreath.bandcamp.com. That is episode 300. I hope everybody gets it. Super proud of it. As I say to our patrons, you will get episode 300 because we promise our patrons every episode you'll get the audio from it in about a year. We'll make that available to you. So if you want to wait, you can just wait and we will release the audio for episode 300 to our patrons in about a year. If you like the sound of that, you like the sound of extra content, and you want to help us keep making Strange Familiars, the way to do that is to become a patron at Patreon, patreon.com/strangefamiliars. Check it out. There's different tiers of support there. No matter what tier of support you choose, you get extra content. We've been doing 2 full episodes of Strange Familiars every month. And we got more on-site from Gettysburg coming for a second patron episode this month. So you'll want to stay tuned for that. Again, that's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. And hey, it's time for the curiosity of the week. It's more owls, Alison. These are snowy owls.
Oh, I love them.
The snowy owls, I think this year they said that they came down to Pennsylvania. They came down as far south as Pennsylvania. You could have seen snowy owls this year. I did not see a snowy owl this year. I haven't given up hope yet.
What does that say in the back? Does it say strange house or strange horde or what is it?
It says, I think...
Maybe it's the genus or something.
Stranghouse. Stranghouse.
Why does it say that?
I don't know. I guess that says house or houser.
Strange house?
Allison, I don't know why these people write things in the back of stereoviews. Last week's stereoview had a bunch of math on the back. I don't know if this was written by the publisher of the stereoview. Sometimes they put notes on them, or if this was part of a collection, or what.
Maybe it's where the owls were housed.
It could have been. It absolutely could have been. I think I might have one more stereoview of owls, but it's got some other things on it too. It's got owls and other things on it as well.
This is just straight owls.
This is straight owls, and this might be my last owl stereo view, at least for a while. I'm sure we'll turn up more, but the owl stereo views are very popular. So grab this one up if you want it, the snowy owls. If you want this, you can go to the show notes under this episode at strangefamiliars.com. You'll see an image of this. You can click on it. It'll take you to our Etsy shop where you can purchase this. Also at Etsy, my books. If you want signed copies of my books, all of my books are there. Artwork, original art, and prints are available there. We've got the traditional, we'll call them the original Strange Familiars t-shirts with the Awoken Tree design. Old photos. Alison's added a bunch of old photos there, and much, much more. Again, our shop name is Lost Grave, but if you type in Strange Familiars, you'll see our stuff come up. While you're on Etsy, check out Chad's shop, Ruck Rabbit Outdoors, and check out our friends at Karmic Garden. They're always adding new stuff, but they have the Strange Familiars and Flannel Man scents there. One more reminder before we go to pre-order your Strange Familiars High Strangeness tour shirts if you want one. I always feel bad when people are disappointed. They say, oh, I really wanted a mug, or oh, I really wanted the keychain. Some of these things we make in limited batches because we can't afford to make an endless amount of them. These shirts are 3-color prints. We can't afford to make a lot of these. So the best way to make sure you get one is to pre-order it. I don't want anybody to be disappointed. So strangefamiliars.com, look for the High Strangeness Tour shirt. You can pre-order at that link until February 27th. And then we will shut down pre-orders and
Get them made.
we will order the shirts, and then we will order extra shirts and sweatshirts, a few, to put on Etsy. But if you want to guarantee you get one, or if you have an extended size and you want to guarantee you get one in your size, please pre-order. Thanks to everyone who has pre-ordered them so far. I think we can call this a success. I'm happy we did them. I'm super excited for this design. So.
You basically do all this because you want one.
Oh, yeah, I totally want one. Yes. I'm going to get 2 for myself. So when I wear one out, I will.
You'll mess it up somehow.
Definitely. Yeah. On site, stuff gets torn up, thorns, crawling in hermit caves, falling in hermit wells. Oh, one more thing about that. There's no cap on that well out there. If you go to look for this area that we talked about, be very careful.
Don't go at night without knowing where you're going.
That well is deep. Chad probed the well with a stick. He didn't find the bottom. It's deep. You don't want to fall in that well. There's no cap on it. So be very careful if you go looking for this. And I would advise, kind of don't. Just don't.
Just take our word for it.
Yeah.
It's out there.
Yeah. We do this so you don't have to. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with another episode of Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts, music, books, art, podcasts, and more. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more Stone Breath or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com, where The Witch Cloud is also available. Strange Familiars is on Facebook, facebook.com/strangefamiliars. You can join the Strange Familiars gathering group there. We are on Instagram. Go ahead and follow us at Strange Familiars, one word. And you can find us on the web at strangefamiliars.com.
Silver hair, spider webs, knot and twist upon my head. Yesterday fades away, rose songs gleam with drops of red. Tears mark all the paths that I roam. Tears will cut strange runes into my bones. Oh, my bones, my old bones. Mirror crack, rippled lane, etched new lines upon my face. Mirror shut, iron hung, leave red streams all in my way. Tears mark all the paths that I roam. Tears will cut strange runes into my bones. Oh, my bones, my old bones. Draw the knife, shine the blade. I walk on fields of my own make. Kiss of brine, tongue of fire. All I give, the worm shall take. Tears mark all the paths that I roam. Tears will